Welcome everyone to TradeStation and another installment of our Trader Interviews podcast series. This podcast series is designed to take you inside the mind of professional traders to understand how they view the markets and how they approach their trading every day. TradeStation is an award-winning direct access broker offering trading in stocks, stock options, and futures, all within one trading platform with low commissions. But you also get the outstanding TradeStation analysis platform with advanced charting, real-time scanning, and powerful options analytics. Our mobile app lets you take your trading on the road. To learn more, I invite you to visit our website at TradeStation.com.
The following podcast is for educational purposes only. All of the symbols and trading ideas discussed are for educational purposes and are not recommendations. Active trading is not suitable for everyone. You can find additional disclosures, including options trading risk disclosures, on the TradeStation website. Welcome everybody to TradeStation and another edition of our Trader Interview series. My name is Michael Burke. I'm Vice President of Client Education here at TradeStation, and today we are privileged to be speaking with a true icon and gentleman in our industry, Mr. John Bollinger. Of course, everyone knows John is famous for inventing Bollinger Bands, but John has had a very diverse and distinguished career in the markets, and we are very fortunate to have him with us today to share his story and insights. John is currently the president and founder of Bollinger Capital Management. It's an investment management company that provides technically driven money management services and develops proprietary research for institutions and individual traders. John has also developed trading tools for TradeStation customers, which are available through the Trading App Store. So John, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Well, Mike, it's entirely my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So John, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in the markets and trading.
Well, the way I really got started was when I was a kid. I mean literally a kid. My grandfather gave me some shares in a company called Fruhoff. It was a company that made shipping containers and, you know, the big 40-foot trucks and such like that. It was the technology of the play of its day, as that was the new paradigm for transferring freight. And over a number of years, I watched it go from a very high price to zero. So that was really my first touch with the markets, and I've been interested in the markets ever since.
So did you have some mentors in those early days?
Not in the early days. I had some people around me that served as sort of examples. When I was going through school, I had a job working for a place called the Museum of the Media, which was like an early multimedia museum concept. And the brothers that ran it were the Globus brothers, and their father was Ronald Globus, who was quite famous at the time as a Wall Street market maker and was very heavily involved in the early IPO scene, especially for technology companies and such like that. So I sort of got a view into that world through them, but it really wasn't until I was about 30 that I got serious about the markets and started devoting full time to them.
You know, you mentioned to me in a conversation a couple weeks ago that you were actually an early adopter of TradeStation in the 80s using System Writer. How did you find TradeStation in those days?
So in my early days of trading, my first 3 or 4 years, I traded out of a brokerage firm. In those days, it was very hard to get access to quotes. You needed a machine the size of a refrigerator to get quotes in your home. So most people who were active in the markets took desks at brokerage firms, and brokers were happy to provide them as long as you did enough business. So I was working at a desk in a brokerage firm and trading very actively. And I was interested in computers also. There was that juncture of sort of technical analysis in computers that fascinated me as I got going in you know, my early days of market analysis and trading. And the guy who sat next to me was the fellow who provided the bridge loan to bring the Financial News Network public. One day he turned around and said, FNN's looking for somebody just like you, somebody who knows a lot about technical analysis and also understands computers. And I said, I'm not really looking for a job. I'm really quite happy here. And at the time in Los Angeles, there was a wonderful character by the name of Ed Hart who had a radio show. And in 10 minutes every morning on the way to work, he could tell you everything you needed to know for the day's trading, all the important headlines and trends and news bits and such. And I heard that Ed Hart went over to FNN, and I said, well, if it's good enough for Ed, it's got to be good enough for me. So I went over there. I became their chief market analyst. I was responsible not only for presenting content on air, but for preparing content for other anchors and other people in the network. And so I was an early adopter of computers, and I was looking around at ways to computerize technical analysis and some of these ideas I had so that I could prepare things quickly. And I discovered a product called System Writer. And System Writer was the Cruz brothers' first product. They went on to found TradeStation, first as a software company and then as a brokerage. But I used the early version of System Writer, which came on a giant stack of 5.5-inch floppies or 5.25-inch floppies. You had to feed them in one by one. It took forever to load it. But it was very useful in terms of running trading systems and running trading approaches and indicators and such like that to create content for the on-air, both for myself and for the other presenters at the Financial News Network.
Do you remember any of the trading strategies or indicators that you were looking at in those days?
Yeah, I sure do. The first one that I looked at probably on TradeStation was the sort of the idea. It was System Writer, but I'll just call it TradeStation for now. The first one I probably tried to deploy on System Writer was a system I'd learned about 1980 or so, and it took the Dow Jones Industrial Average with percentage trading bands, and it compared price action within the bands to a couple of indicators that were derived from broad market information like advances and declines or up and down volume. It would give you warnings of impending weakness or impending strength in the market, and I would present those on air. So that was probably those were probably amongst the first ideas that I ever implemented on System Writer.
That sounds like a good trading idea.
It's still a good trading idea. It needs to be modified a little bit to fit today's markets. You have to get rid of those percentage trading bands and put in Bollinger Bands place. And that is in fact the derivation of Bollinger Bands, was that system. That system required that you fit those trading bands to the markets, and they changed over time, so you had to change the width, and it was sort of a problem, because as you changed the width, if you were bullish, you'd paint yourself a bullish picture, and if you were bearish, you'd paint yourself a bearish picture. So it was problematic because you were letting your emotions into the marketplace. And I was looking for an automated way to set the width of those bands so I wouldn't have to do it myself. I was an option trader at the time, so I knew a lot about volatility. And one day I copied the formula for volatility down in an early spreadsheet and saw that it was changing. In those days, we believed volatility was a static quantity. We didn't believe that it is the dynamic quantity we know it as today. So I thought, well, maybe I can use this quality volatility to set the width of trading bands. And after a few iterations, there were Bollinger Bands, and the formula hasn't changed in all the years since.
That's interesting. So nowadays, well, obviously, I know that you're still using Bollinger Bands, but what other kind of tools are you looking at to generate new trade ideas?
So I've had a career really in volatility. I've thought about volatility, basically my entire career. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about and looking at volatility in ways that it expands and contracts and varies over the market cycle. So volatility is a very big piece of my analytical process. Another piece that I like an awful lot that I don't see used that much anymore, but I find incredibly useful myself, is comparing the action of industry groups and market sectors. When I say a market sector, like basic materials or consumer non-durables or consumer durables or finance or something like that. The market really favors different sectors and different groups, sometimes for long periods of time. So if in addition to developing an opinion on a stock, you can get some background information from the group and from the sector that support your decision, it really improves the odds of success. And that's really what my career has been about. You know, Mike, if you think about it, there are really only two avenues to improve your trading success. You can either improve the number of winning trades versus the number of losing trades. Say you're making 60% winning trades, and you can try to push it towards 65 or 67, 68, maybe even 70%. That'll help a lot. The other dimension is the relative size of your winners versus the relative size of your losers. So I'm really interested in trying to increase the size of my winners versus the size of my losers. So if you get both of those pieces working for you, you get 60, 65% winning trades, and your winners are twice the size of your losers. You actually have quite a good trading approach on your hands, and with a little discipline and some position sizing, you can actually do quite well. There's another philosophy which I've never ascribed to, but some people do. Some people are like home run hitters. They go constantly going for that giant trade, that trade where you're up 1,000% or something like that, and they're willing to endure an awful lot of small losses in pursuit of that one really, really big win. And that's just not my mindset. I just don't find that comfortable. For me, it's much more comfortable when I'm running, more winners than losers, and my winners are quite a bit bigger than my losers. I can live with that sort of dynamic much better than I can the home run hitting ethic.
Yeah, psychologically, it's very hard to trade when you're losing more times than you're winning, and typically what ends up happening is that traders lose confidence, or they're just not able to follow through, and that's a big problem. And being able to develop a strategy where you've got more winners than losers, that definitely helps. But to your point, so how do you approach your exits? Are they primarily technical, or do you have some kind of fixed money management that you apply, or a combination of both?
I don't have any sort of fixed money management that I use. I've never really found an approach that met my criteria. I do use stops. I use primarily what I call chandelier stops. It's an idea that I learned from Chuck LeBeau. It's a progressive stop that's driven by the trade as you in a long position. As the item that you're long makes higher highs, the stop gets incremented to the upside. I really like that sort of approach. We call that entire category trailing stops. I'm very fond of those. I do, upon occasion, use some sorts of price targets. There are a couple of trading approaches I developed that have some sense of a price target. I've never really found them to be very effective. I'd rather go along and see once I'm in the trade. I'd really rather go along and see how long I can stay in it and see how much I can get out of it. And for that, those trailing stops for me work very well.
So right now you're primarily trading stocks. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm primarily a stock trader. That's what I started trading. So it's near and dear to me. But I trade some futures, and recently I've been spending more time thinking about some of the alternative markets like Bitcoin and foreign exchange and such like that. I'm not active in those markets yet, but for example, Bitcoin, the price of a Bitcoin in US dollars really responds beautifully to the sort of analysis that I do, and I've posted some notes on entry and exit points on Bitcoin that have proved to be very interesting. I don't see that there's, at least for me, that there's any practical way to trade it, but I've been studying it, and maybe one day if we get a Bitcoin ETF, which the SEC doesn't seem to want to allow, but maybe one day if we get a Bitcoin ETF, I'll be ready to trade it when it comes.
So you also look at ETFs, don't you? Especially with the sector stuff that you do. Do you trade those ETFs directly?
Yeah, I like the ETFs a lot. I think that they, especially if you have an idea, and let's just pick a sector out of the blue. Let's say basic materials has been clumping along, not doing much, and is now starting to pick up a little relative strength. And you look inside the basic material sector, and you see that the steel group is really starting to pick up some relative strength. It's got some accumulation distribution going forward in a positive sense. So you say, wow, okay, let's look at the steel stocks. Or it might come the opposite direction. You might start looking at steel stocks and say they're starting to poke up, so then you look at the group and you look at the sector. It doesn't really matter which direction you go. But in that circumstance, sometimes you look into the group and, there just isn't a great idea in there. You look and there's a dozen stocks in there and you say, oh, I don't, I'm not particularly in love with the patterns on any of these. I don't think any of them really offer me an advantage from my perspective. So a steel ETF is the perfect way to play that then. So, sometimes you see a stock or two, it's really clear that that's where you want to be. And sometimes you just want to participate in the area. And then, some of these ETFs can really be terrific.
I agree. So, John, if you could give some advice to that aspiring trader listening to this, what would that advice be?
I get that question an awful lot, Mike, and there really is only one answer to it. It's an answer nobody wants to hear, but there really is only one answer, and that the difference between successful traders and non-successful traders isn't their systems or approaches or anything like that. It's discipline. Successful traders are always disciplined. They execute their system and they don't stray from it. It doesn't mean that it has to be a mechanical system. It could be an intuitive system. There are intuitive stock pickers who are very disciplined and, really go after ideas. So it doesn't mean that, you have to have a mechanical approach, but you have to have discipline. You can't let things get out of hand and such like that. Earlier, you asked me about my mentors, and shortly after I started in this business, I spent a year keeping charts for a fellow. Back in those days, we copied prices off a Cotron terminal and kept charts on paper, point and figure charts using pens. So I kept charts for a guy for a period of a year for nothing, an apprentice to learn technical analysis. And, most people think of mentors as somebody you learn something from in a positive sense. Well, the truth is that I did learn a lot about technical analysis, at least while I was there. I'm not sure I learned it from him, but I learned a lot of technical analysis during that year. But what I really learned from him was what not to do. This was a very undisciplined guy who had a severe drinking problem and constantly let trades get totally out of control and such like that. Racked up huge losses, ended up essentially imploding his firm. Within a few years was dead from the results of alcoholism. So I got an up close and personal kind of view of what not to do. In many ways, I think that may have been more useful than, finding somebody who really would teach me how to trade. I had to learn how to trade on my own and from the books and from chatting with other people. I learned a lot of very powerful lessons about discipline and what not to do from watching this poor guy just destroy his life and everything around him.
That is funny and sad at the same time.
Tell it as a funny story. I apprenticed to a guy who blew up. Doesn't the word poignant sort of mean funny and sad combined and such like that? And, there you go.
So, John, over the years, besides Bollinger Bands and derivations of Bollinger Bands, you've created a lot of different indicators and pattern recognition tools, and you're starting to develop those tools for TradeStation, for our customers, and you've got some of those tools in the trading app store. So can you tell me a little bit about what you've got in the store and what you've got coming up in the store?
The first thing we put in the store was my toolkit. And that's exactly what it is. It's like when you go to the garage to get your car fixed, and the mechanic has that giant toolbox with open all the drawers and all the tools inside it. Well, that's the Bollinger Band toolkit. It has a multiplicity of tools, both related to Bollinger Bands and not related to Bollinger Bands that I've developed over the years. And that's really for the do-it-yourselfer, the person who wants to build their own trading system, research their own ideas, come up with new visions and such like that. It contains most of the things that I've created across my career. And frankly, some people open that up and go, oh my, what am I going to do with all of this? And in response to that, we realized that there were some areas that people were really specifically interested in, and they wanted very specific tools. And so we embarked on a program to create some very focused and narrow packages that would let the person do a single job and do that really, really well. And the first one is to trade the Bollinger Bands squeeze. That's a period where the bands come in very tight together, and it's a forecast for volatility, the forecast for a birth of a new trend. So we developed not only some charting tools to help find them in real time on charts, but a very powerful radar screen approach so that you can put in a list of stocks and it'll pop up little warnings whenever they're in a squeeze, or the opposite of squeeze is a bulge. That's a marker of the end of a trend. It also show you breakouts and where price has gotten outside of the bands and back inside, which are the key to the head fake, which is another piece of the squeeze trading that people like an awful lot. So we made that very focused package. It's sort of a distillation of some of the tools that were in the Bollinger Band toolkit, and then we took and combined them in interesting ways so that there was a great deal more utility. For example, you can take a couple of those tools and you can put them in a TradeStation scan and run it overnight on a giant list of stocks, thousands of them if you like, and it'll pop up a list in the morning of all the candidate stocks that meet those criteria for you to scan through and take a look and see if you can find some ideas that you like. And then we're currently hard at work on the second one, which is W bottoms. We have an approach to automatically find double bottoms in the marketplace with a very specific criteria that allow us to focus in on those patterns that we think have the highest probabilities of success. And some months out, we'll have a third package called Icebreaker, which is a mean reversion trading system that looks for sharp moves in the market and fades them with the idea that prices will head back toward the mean. In these markets, frankly, overshoot the mean and make some progress beyond the mean in the other direction. So those are three of the ideas that we're working on, and we've got a couple more that I'm not really ready to talk about yet. But I think this idea of producing these very, very focused tools makes it much easier for traders to hone in on individual ideas and actually get productive work done on the platform.
Yeah, TradeStation is the perfect platform for that. You can scan on technical, historical indicators at whatever interval you want to on the entire universe of stocks. And that's really a very unique tool. And then Radar Screen allows you to do the same scanning in real time on any interval using custom tools. I think it's a perfect marriage of the analysis and the ideas that you have and getting those into actionable ideas.
You know, initially I was a little confused about Radar Screen and the scan, and then, you know, once I got it, you know, the Radar Screen is that tool that you use during the day to monitor everything in real time. Use that scan tool to go through the universe, you know, overnight, or so you can actually use it during the day as well. But I do my runs overnight so that in the morning I have some ideas that I can look at, especially in these quickly moving markets, set you up for success really well.
So, John, we're just about at the end of our time. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us? Do you have any upcoming events? Are you doing any traveling before we sign off?
I am doing some traveling. I'll be doing presentations. You know, Bollinger Bands has been adopted all across the world, and for example, I'm headed to Japan very shortly to teach the Japanese about Bollinger Bands. As you know, the portal for everything Bollinger Bands is bollingerbands.com. If you visit there, there's tutorial information. There are DVDs of our seminars. We've taken 2- and 3-day seminars and condensed them down to a couple of DVDs. There's my book, Bollinger on Bollinger Bands, and a wide variety of tools and techniques. Plus, you know, I write a monthly newsletter, the Bollinger Band letter, with it accompanied by a weekly hotline. So all of that's available through bollingerbands.com.
Okay, excellent. Well, again, I want to thank John Bollinger for spending this time with us today. This was really great, John. I really appreciate it. You can discover more about John by visiting his website, as he said, at bollingerbands.com, and by visiting the TradeStation App Store and taking a free trial of the tools for the TradeStation platform. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Be sure to tune in and subscribe to our TradeStation podcasts. And of course, don't forget to visit our website, www.tradestation.com, to learn more about our outstanding educational resources and online brokerage services. Once again, thanks a lot, John, and everybody, have a good day.
Thank you, Mike.